more at hcflgov.net/hiking spree.
Good evening. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening. I want to welcome you to the December 16th, 2019 Zoning Hearing Master Hearing. My name is Susan Finch, and I will be presiding over the majority of the cases with the exception of the first case tonight, which will be heard by Hearing Master Scarola, who is to my right. I'll start by introducing Mr. Brian Grady, who's with the Development Services Department. He's at the end of the dais. He'll go over our changes to tonight's agenda and also introduce the other members of the planning team on the dais. Mr. Grady.
Good evening, Ms. Finch. Again, for the record, Brian Grady, Hillsborough County Development Services. Before I go through the changes to the agenda, joining us at the dais tonight are to my left, Lewis Whitehead with the County Attorney's Office. To his left, Unica Mills with the Hillsborough County City County Planning Commission. And to her left, Tom Hisney with Development Services. Tom will be handling the special use portion of tonight's agenda. We do have a number of changes on tonight's agenda. The first change is on page 9, item E1, rezoning application 19-0838, DMD Support Group. The applicant is requesting a continuance to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. I believe the applicant is here to explain the reasons for the request.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Finch. I'm Michael Horner, 14502 North Dale Mary Highway, Tampa, representing DMD Support Group. This is our last shot for continuance. Ms. Finch, we have worked diligently with staff, Planning Commission. We need to revise our plans. We're working for a southwest access connector road. We're also increasing lot sizes based upon most recent staff comments. So we'll be meeting with staff this week, filing revised plans probably by Monday, and we respectfully request your continuance, your approval of our continuance.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience regarding agenda item E1, rezoning PD 19-0838, that would like to speak to the issue of the continuance? All right, seeing no one, then we'll grant the continuance of rezoning PD 19-0838 to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing at 6 p.m.
The next item on change is on page 10 of the agenda, item E5, rezoning app PD 19-1344. Potomac Land Company staff is requesting a continuance to the February 18th, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Ms. Finch, an issue arose regarding a neighborhood meeting, working with the applicant. The applicant is in agreement to continue this in order to have an opportunity to conduct a neighborhood meeting. So that's why staff is continuing to provide for that neighborhood meeting in accordance with the requirements in the Land Development Code.
All right, so no request necessary. That's just an automatic
Yes.
continuance. All right, then rezoning PD 19-1344 will be continued to the February 18th, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing at 6 p.m.
The next change is on page 10 of the agenda, item E6, rezoning application PD 19-1420. The applicant is Highland Summer LLC. The applicant is requesting a continuance to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing.
Good evening. David Wright, TSP Companies, P.O. Box 1016, Tampa, Florida. We received some comments from EPC staff that are requiring us to revise our site plan, so we're requesting a 30-day continuance to allow that time, please.
All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the continuance only of item E6, rezoning PD 19-1420? All right, seeing no one, we'll continue PD 19-1420 to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing at 6 p.m.
And
Mr. Wright, I need you to come sign in, please.
And we have one more change to the agenda. We revised shortly before the beginning of the hearing that the applicant for item E4 on page 10 of the agenda, rezoning application 19-1308, D.R. Horton, they would like to request a continuance to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing.
Good evening.
Good evening. Clayton Brickelmeyer for the applicant. We actually would like to request to go to February.
Okay.
We've got...
That'll be February 18th.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
We have some conditions to work out, and we think we need to have meetings that will necessitate us we're not going to get them over Christmas week. So that would be our request.
All right.
Thanks.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to agenda item E4, rezoning PD 19-1308, to speak to the continuance only? Anyone here that would like to speak? All right. Seeing no one, we will continue rezoning PD 19-1308 to the February 18th, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing at 6 p.m.
That concludes the changes of the agenda. I'll now go through the published withdrawals and continuances beginning on page 5 of the agenda. The first item, item A1, rezoning standard 19-0730. This application is being withdrawn from the zoning hearing master process. Item A2, rezoning standard 19-0748. This application is being withdrawn from the zoning hearing master process. Item A3, major mod application 19-0830. This application is being withdrawn from the zoning hearing master process. Item A4, rezoning plan development 19-0935. This application is being continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A5, special use application 19-1026. This application is being continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 land use hearing officer hearing. I would note that it will be a 10 a.m. Start time. It would not be heard in the meetings. Special use applications are being heard in the morning session now, so I'll note that for the record. A6, major mod application 19-1169. This application has been continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. A7, special use application 19-1174. This application has been continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 land use hearing officer hearing beginning at 10 a.m. A8, major mod application 19-1329. This application is being continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A9, major mod application 19-1331. This application is being continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A10, special use application 19-1383. This application is being continued by staff to the January 21st, 2020 land use hearing officer hearing at 10 a.m. A11, rezoning application 19-1421. This application has been continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A12, rezoning standard 19-1422. This application has been continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A13, rezoning standard 19-1428. This application is out of order to be heard and has been continued to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A14, rezoning PD 19-1443. This application is being continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A15, rezoning PD 19-1445. This application has been continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A16, rezoning PD 19-1451. This application has been continued by the applicant to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A17, rezoning PD 19-1458. This application is out of order to be heard and has been continued to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A18, rezoning PD 19-1461. This application is out of order to be heard and has been continued to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A19, major mod 19-1462. This application has been continued by staff to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A20, rezoning standard 20-0030. This application is out of order to be heard and has been continued to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A21, rezoning standard 20-0043. This application has been continued by staff to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A22, rezoning standard 20-0065. This application is out of order to be heard and has been continued to the January 21st, 2020 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A23, special use AB 20-0073. This application is out of order to be heard and has been continued to the January 21st, 2020 land use hearing officer at 10 a.m. And then item A24, special use AB 20-0074. This application has been continued by staff to the January 21st, 2020 land use hearing officer hearing at 10 a.m. That concludes all changes to the agenda.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Grady. I appreciate it. Let me go over our procedures tonight as well as our hearing process. As I mentioned, tonight's first agenda item will be a remand that will be heard by Hearing Master Scarola. We'll then go to the special use case, which is second on tonight's agenda, and that is a case that I will hear as the hearing master and make a decision within 15 business days following tonight's hearing. The remainder of the cases require, as is the case with the remand, the remainder of the cases require a public hearing be held before a zoning hearing master prior to the final decision, which is made by the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners. I'll conduct the hearing tonight as the hearing master and make a recommendation on each application 15 business days following tonight's hearing. That recommendation will then be sent to the Board of County Commissioners for their final decision. Our hearing tonight is informal. I'll ask questions related to the direct testimony presented tonight. I'll call and question witnesses as I deem appropriate and necessary, and will decide all questions of procedure. Irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious evidence will be excluded. Any part of evidence may be received in written form, and all testimony must be under oath. Hearsay evidence may be used for the purpose of supplementing or explaining other evidence, but shall not be sufficient in and of itself to support a finding by me unless it would be admissible over objections in a civil action. Our order of presentation tonight is as follows. Mr. Grady of the Development Services Department will provide a brief introduction for each agenda item. We'll then go to the applicant. The applicant and their team have a total presentation time of 15 minutes. Next, we'll go back to the county's Development Services Department staff planner assigned to the case, who has 5 minutes to go over the county's findings and recommendation. And then we'll go to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission also has 5 minutes to discuss the application's consistency with the comprehensive plan. Next, we'll go to proponents, anyone who would like to speak in favor of an application. Everybody has a total time of 15 minutes. Same is true when we go to opponents, anyone who would like to speak against an application. Everyone total has 15 minutes. Then we go back to county staff, who has another 5 minutes to make any comments based on tonight's testimony. And finally, we go back to the applicant, who has 5 minutes for rebuttal. When you come up to the podium, if you do plan to speak, when you come up to the podium to speak, make sure you speak clearly into the microphone, and always start by giving us your name and address for the record. We are recording this hearing and also have a court reporter, and want to make sure that we know in the transcript who is speaking. When you are done speaking, if you could see Allison at the end of the dais, raise your hand, Allison. There she is. She's with the clerk's office. And you also will need to sign in with your name and address and the application number that you're speaking about. Because we are going to start with a zoning case, I'll ask Mr. Whitehead of the County Attorney's Office to explain the legal requirements for oral argument that govern your participation before the Board of County Commissioners. If you would like to speak, there are certain procedures you need to follow, forms you need to fill out in a timely manner in order to maintain your right to speak to the Board of County Commissioners. Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. The hearing, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Louis Whitehead, Assistant County Attorney. The hearing master will file a recommendation for each rezoning application heard tonight on January 9th, 2020. And the next step will be a public meeting before the Board of County Commissioners, at which time the board will make a decision on each rezoning petition. After the recommendations have been filed by the hearing officer, each individual who desires to address the board at the public meeting must file an oral argument request no later than the close of business on January the 17th. These petitions are scheduled to be heard by the board at the board's February 11th land use meeting. Oral argument request forms are available on the table located at the entrance to this auditorium. And we do have a staff member available to assist you if you have any questions regarding oral argument. Please note that oral argument requests must be responsive to the hearing master's recommendation. Accordingly, oral argument requests should not be filed until the hearing master's recommendation have been delivered to the county on January 9th. Now, the board is not required to hear oral argument, but they can elect to hear oral argument from a party of record under certain circumstances that are set forth in the Land Development Code. Oral argument requests should clearly indicate why oral argument is necessary to address at least one of 4 outstanding issues, all of which are set forth in the Land Development Code. The scope of oral argument will be limited to the content of testimony and other evidence submitted verbally or in writing to the hearing master tonight. the board will consider only the record of tonight's hearing and the recommendation of the hearing master in rendering its decision. The county attorney's role is to ensure that only individuals who have met the party record requirements are allowed to address the board, and that new evidence or testimony is not introduced or allowed at the public meeting. For these reasons, please ensure that all information that you desire the board to consider at the public meeting is placed into the record tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehead. I appreciate it. All right, as I mentioned, all testimony must be under oath. So if you plan to speak tonight, if you could please stand and raise your right hand, and I'll swear you in. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated. All right, then with that, we'll turn the hearing over to Hearing Master Scarola, who will hear the first case.
Okay, Brian?
The first item on tonight's agenda is agenda item B1, rezoning PD 19-0282, the Ackman Zark LLC. The request is to rezone from commercial general to a planned development. Michelle Hyber will provide staff recommendation at the presentation by staff. This was remanded by the Board of County Commissioners in order to provide more information in the record regarding design exceptions, and I believe the applicant also has additional information regarding approvals from TICO for the roadway crossing, which was an issue of concern at the last hearing.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Manier. I'm with the Genesis Group, and it's 1000 North Ashley, Suite 900, downtown Tampa. And this is a remand, and I'm hoping that all the previous information we've already submitted is already accurate, or already in the record and everything. And I'd like to just basically discuss where we are. The only issue we had before was a substandard road issue on 86th Street, specifically as they relate to a TICO easement. We've been able to resolve that. We've got an approved design exception. It's in your package. We also have a letter from TICO that says that it's okay to have an access across their road, and then any further development, we have to go back and meet with them. And I really appreciate staff writing up a condition that allows us to do that. That way it offers us a variety of different ways to, based on the ultimate end user, we'll just negotiate with TICO at that time. So
this was the issue of the critical design element?
That's right. What happened was, it's in essence that instead of a critical design element, we were able to get a letter from TICO, and we were able to get the 86th Street design exception approved. So we don't need the critical design element. So
Okay.
we kind of meet the test.
All right, and with respect to 86th Street, was there any specific questions from the board about it, or only what is the design exception?
My recollection is they wanted to have that design exception so they understood the nature of the design exception before acting on the application. So
Okay.
you had previously we had not supported it and had not reviewed the design exception, so the board was desirous to, since they had the information about TICO, to understand what that design exception would entail before they made their decision on the
Okay,
request.
so the only issues here today are that you received the TICO letter, so you know you can cross the TICO easement, and the 86th Street design exception is in place.
It has been approved and signed and everything, and it's part of your package. So we checked off the two boxes.
Anything else that I need?
But the only other thing is staff's been great with us working on some of the conditions, and I believe there's one in particular that's being tweaked, roadway versus drive aisle. And that's just basically because it's going to be an internal private road. If we do the multifamily, it's not going to be a public road in any way, shape, or form. It'll be, and staff's been great in working with us on that. The only other thing is we are not objecting to any of the conditions, although we want to mention on the record that we felt some of the traffic conditions are overkill because we have a contract buyer who will generate fewer trips, but we're not objecting to any of the conditions, and we'll take what we got. And
Okay.
we appreciate staff and their patience in working with us.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Ms. Heinrich? Good evening.
Good evening, Michelle Heinrich, Development Services. As you heard, this is a remand request for an application previously heard before you, and the concern was that there were 3 development options that were shown on the site plan and reviewed by staff, and all of those included an access on 86th, 82nd, and Causeway. That is what was shown on the plan and also in the traffic analysis. However, we identified that the TICO easement could later, after the rezoning, mean that access may not occur. So we were hoping to get something from TICO that could substantiate what they were asking us to review. And also, as stated, there was also an outstanding design exception that was needed. So given those two items, we weren't able to support it. The applicant, as you know, asked for a remand, and in that time, the design exception has been reviewed and approved, and that is in your backup. That is Exhibit 5. And the TICO letter has been given to us, as Mr. Menear stated, stating that the access and crossing is permitted. And that is also in the staff report backup as Exhibit 6. And lastly, as Mr. Menear stated, there are some changes to conditions that have to do with the roadway versus drive aisle language for the options. So I have those changes to provide to you, and Mr. Menear was provided a copy before the hearing.
Great. And just to fill this one in, the critical design element, I noticed it was mentioned in your staff report.
Yeah, I was not aware that the applicant wanted that removed.
Okay.
So being as it is now, I know that that was offered by the applicant at the original hearing when the possibility of that access point wasn't certain. They were kind of self-imposing that they would come back not only for just a PRS, but a major mod if TICO then said it wouldn't be able to happen. So for right now, the way it's shown on the plan and the conditions, it has to occur. So if anything were to change that, they would have to come back. But we wouldn't object to that language being removed as far as I know, and transportation can certainly maybe speak to that better. But I wasn't aware that the applicant no longer wanted that in the conditions.
Okay, so it was a little confusion then. Mr. Menear, can you speak to that? Because if you're going to, well, let's see what you prefer.
I'm sorry, it wasn't, we did not want the condition anymore. We felt we no longer needed the condition. But if that condition still needs to be put in to make sure that we get onto 86th Street, we're okay with that.
Okay, so we can leave it because.
We can leave it,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, if we do not get access onto 86, we'll be back in front of you.
Okay,
Yeah, it wasn't, we didn't want it, we felt we no longer needed it.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please, Michelle, thank you. Michelle, any more testimony, or is that it?
No, sir, unless you have any questions.
I don't, but thank you very much. And the planning, transportation?
No question, unless you have.
I don't, thank you, though. And planning commission?
Unica Mills Planning Commission staff, the subject property is located within the residential 20 future land use classification, the urban service area, and the Greater Palm River Community Planning Area. The comprehensive plan encourages clear and efficient patterns of movement for access and circulation by designing roadway improvements and new roadways with patterns of access to enhance livability of transportation system. And with this remand, the applicant has now provided staff with a letter from TICO, which enables a crossing at 86, making the project more compatible with the area, which is consistent with policy direction of policy 1.4 of the comprehensive plan. And based on that consideration, Planning Commission staff found that the proposed development was consistent with the future of Hillsborough comp plan.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody here tonight in support of this request? Seeing none, is there any opposition tonight on this request? Anything else from staff? Mr. Menear? Okay, with that, we'll close the remand on 19-0282, and I'll turn it back over to Hearing Officer Finch.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Now, we're going to hear, the next case is a special use, so we'll go back to Mr. Whitehead to have him explain your procedure to appeal decisions made by a land use hearing officer. Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Louis Whitehead, Assistant County Attorney. Decisions on special uses will be filed with the clerk of the board on January the 9th, 2020. The Land Development Code provides that anyone who desires to receive a copy of the hearing officer's decision by mail must furnish the clerk of the board with the name, address, the case number, and a stamped self-addressed envelope. The hearing officer's decisions on special uses may be appealed to the Land Use Appeals Board. The appeal must be filed with the Development Services Department within 30 calendar days from the date that the hearing officer's decision is filed with the clerk of the board. A decision by the hearing officer may be appealed by or intervened in by a person or entity that is present or represented at tonight's hearing and presents either testimony or evidence or documentary evidence themselves or another prior to or during tonight's hearing and is adversely affected by the decision of the hearing officer. The evidence that the appeals board can consider is limited to the evidence that is presented tonight. This means that at the end of tonight's hearing on each special use, the case record closes and no new evidence may be submitted. The county attorney's role is to ensure that no new evidence or testimony is allowed before the appeals board in connection with this decision. The county attorney will advise the appeals board to disregard evidence or testimony that is not in the record that's made tonight. Therefore, please be assured that all information that you may desire the appeals board to consider is placed into the record. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Whitehead, I appreciate it. All right, then we're ready for that case. Mr. Hisney, please.
We have one special use on the agenda tonight. It's item C1, application number 19-1332. The applicant is Cookson Hills Family Ministries of Florida Incorporated. The request is for a special use permit for a private school and professional residential facility. Staff report and recommendation will be presented by Steve Beachy following the applicant's presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Finch. For the record, Michael Horner, 14502 North Dale Mabry Highway, Tampa, representing the applicant today. With me this evening is the Executive Director of Legacy Christian Academy and Family Ministries of Florida, Mr. Bob Sharp. We also have Mr. Michael Yates of Palm Traffic Engineering, who will be offering testimony, along with Mr. Sharp, at the conclusion of my comments. First, Madam Hearing Master, just thanks to staff, Mr. Hisney, transportation staff, Mike Williams, Public Works, for allowing us. We had to bump this case from November to tonight to work through those issues and a few minor site plan revisions. Those have been filed. We stand before you with unanimous recommendations of approval. We have no opposition that I'm aware of. We have consistency findings from the Planning Commission for support, consistency with all goals, policies, and objectives of the future land use element. I'm not aware of any review agency objections. We have no wetlands on site. So I think it comes to you with favorable recommendations all around. We have, this is a 13.6 acre tract, Ms. Finch. It's at the northwest quadrant of Parsons Avenue and Old Hillsborough Avenue. It's just south of US 92. It is Res 4 in the comp plan, urban service areas, so we will have public water and sewer. This facility already exists and was approved back in 2004. We currently have AR zoning. The prior petition approved back in 2004, which is some 15 years ago, is 04583. I think Mr. Beachy's report does a fine job of going through what was approved for and what our proposed changes are as part of this amended special use. It was, I might note, approved back then for 225 students, including 56 on-site residents and 169 off-site, although there's also a condition that's included in that approval that talks about 257 students being the maximum. Suffice to say, our proposal is not anywhere near those thresholds, so this is actually a down zoning in terms of the student intensity. Both are still filed under the respective LDC sections for both the school and professional residential facility. Currently, Ms. Finch, there are 39 students, including 18 on-site residents and 21 off-site students. The issue, you're probably wondering, why are we here if we're so far under? We have a building square footage deficiency in terms of what the initial special use allowed us for. That 2004 cap on square footage was around 34,350 square feet. We are proposing a new education center and gymnasium / multi-purpose center and new residential facility that totals 34,400 square feet. So just those new improvements are essentially similar to what was prior approved for the cap of the overall square footage. We have an existing residential facility of about 14,750 square feet, plus an existing 2,600 square feet of office space. Our new total is therefore 51,750 square feet. I should note that both our prior plan of record and my narrative report that was carried over into the Planning Commission report capped that at 50,000 square feet. Mr. Beachy was sharp enough to pick that discrepancy up. So we have filed revised plans to the county. I'm also filing a revised plan and a revised narrative into the record tonight that corrects that cap figure. Either way, Ms. Finch, that FAR increase, as you can imagine, special uses are permitted up to 0.25 floor area ratio. This is a large tract, almost 13.75 acres in size. We are at 0.087. We're going from 0.06. So we are well under those floor area ratio caps in the Res 4 plan sector. We also have agreed as part of this restriction to cap the off-site residents, those that would be actually commuting back and forth for their students and dropping the kids off in the morning and afternoon, to 140 off-site students, plus 56 on-site residents. So we're capping overall at 196, but capping most importantly, because of the traffic generation issues that Mr. Yates will go into, at just 140 off-site students. We agreed to some other restrictions as well. I guess the most important one would be requiring all access, ingress to be off Old Hillsborough Avenue, and then all exiting to be to Parsons Avenue. So that allows for a greater queue opportunity, easier restrictions, maneuvering on site, and it opens up that entire extended queue that Mr. Yates will address just momentarily. I'm not aware of any other objections. As I said, we have no wetlands on site. We're agreeing to all staff conditions of record. Happy to answer any questions. I'll turn it over to Mr. Yates on traffic issues.
I just had a quick one. I think
Certainly.
you answered it. I just want to make sure we're clear for the record. So the major reason to go through this process is to increase that building square footage?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But then by virtue of decreasing the students, then I guess Mr. Yates will get to this, but your trip generation goes down.
That's correct.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Michael Yates, Palm Traffic, 400 North Tampa Street, Suite 1500. Basically, yes, to answer your question, the trip generation, with the reduction in students, we're going from 201 off-site to 140 off-site. So with that reduction, we reduced the daily AM and PM peak hour trips. As you can see from the attached table, it's a pretty low trip generator anyway. It's 347 daily trips, 112 during the AM peak hour, and 24 during the PM peak hour. I'm going to walk through the circulation plan. Basically, the change that is occurring with this plan change is that currently they use both access points, one on Parsons and then one on Old Hillsborough Avenue. They use both of these today to enter and exit. With the change, they will now all enter off of Old Hillsborough Avenue and exit off of Parsons Avenue. With that provides additional queuing. So for the 140 students, it is required 858 feet of queue. With this plan, we are able to provide 1,441 feet of linear queue. So we have an excess queue of 583 feet. And the reason for that, this is already an existing roadway in the existing configuration. This is the new larger building that's being added. So we're able to accommodate that additional queue. I'll be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
No, you answered my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Finch, if Mr. Bob Sharp could just offer a few comments. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Bob Sharp. I'm the Executive Director at Family Ministries of Florida, 147 Elina Sky Drive, Sefton, Florida, 33584. And I want to thank you for hearing our case. The residential program, some people are kind of confused why we have residential and also off campus. Our residential program has been in existence since 1976 in the Sefner, at the Sefner location. We are able to care for children that can't live at home for one reason or another. It's a different kind of group home, essentially in the sense that we use a true family model. So these children get to come in and be part of a family. Our staff, our house parents, as we call them, live right there on site. They are there with the children 24/7. And our niche with this really is that sibling groups can be together. We currently have 2 sets of 5 sibling groups on our campus, which is great, so the siblings can be together. And then we started the school back in 2003, I believe is when we started, laid out plans for it, and when we came before and got that special use permit, we had big ideas of a lot of students, but we didn't realize we were locked into that amount of space. And so as the school has grown and the need has grown, we're getting some interest from people in the community. We're getting more and more people that are interested because it is a different model of education. We're trying to reach those kids that are falling through the cracks at risk. I'm happy to stand here today and tell you that about 90% of our students that have graduated from our school have gone on to either some type of vocational training or a 4-year college. We even have some that have gone as far as to get their master's degrees. So we're turning out something different. It's an action-based learning environment. The kids are active. That's one of the reasons why we want to include the gymnasium, which will include some programming that we do in the school, which is balometrics, which may not mean anything to you all, but it has to do with balance and bringing our kids back into balance. We work with an occupational therapist for that. We're probably one of the only schools in the country that has put that into the curriculum. So it's a rather unique thing, but we're finding that a lot of students need that. And so our intent is not to be 800, 1,000 students. We like being the 150 to 200 or just under 200 range, because we want to have the connection with the students. We want to have the connection with the family, because your students will spend more awake time in school than they will at home with their parents. So we want to have the communication. That's one of the reasons why we started the school, is be able to have that communication with the parents. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I don't, but thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right. Mr. Horner, does that complete your testimony?
Yes, it does.
All right. Thank you so
Ms.
much.
Finch.
Development Services.
Good evening, Steve Beachy, Development Services. The applicant previously received approval for the special use in 04. The application was 040583 for the K through 12 school integrated with professional residential facility recovery home type C. The subject application is an update of the current approval. The 2004 application allowed for construction of 34,352 square feet. The subject application represents an increase to 51,750. That's a 51% increase from the previous approval. Similarly, the maximum, previously the maximum was 169 students, off-site commuter students. The current application represents a decrease of 29 students to 140 off-site students allowed to enroll. That's a 17% decrease. And the maximum number of students remains the same for residential students at 56. The changes in the proposed conditions from the 2004 approval are as follows: an increase in the development entitlements and change in the mix of the on-site residents and off-site residents, additional transportation-related requirements related to access, pickup and drop-off times, exit signage, cones, sidewalks, internal circulation patterns, and reporting requirements were added in the conditions that you'll see. I want to make one mention of the conditions. We received the revised site plan with the change in the number of for the development entitlements to 51,000, and that means that we need to change the date on the recommended conditions when they were submitted to December 12.
I see.
Staff finds that the subject facility as revised will remain compatible with the surrounding area and will reduce potential traffic impacts, as the number of students that may reside off-site will be less than what is permitted under current conditions of approval. Based on the above, staff finds the request to be approval, subject to the recommended conditions in this report. Available for any questions.
I don't have any at this time, but thank you. Planning Commission.
Unica Mills Planning Commission staff, the subject site is located within the residential 4 future land use classification, the urban service area, and the Sefner Mango community planning area. The application is requesting an increase in allowable floor area ratio. However, the proposal is well below what can be considered within the residential 4 future land use classification. The proposed use is also classified as a residential support use per policy 17.1 of the future land use element. Residential support uses such as child care centers, adult care centers, churches, etc., are allowable within any class of residential, commercial, or industrial land use plan category, as long as the design is compatible with the area. The proposed access points provide additional connectivity in the area and satisfies policy 16.3 of the future land use element. Overall, the staff finds the proposed use and density consistent with the Sefner Mango community plan. The proposal supports the vision of that community plan, and overall, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed special use consistent with the future Hillsborough Comp plan.
All right, thank you so much. We'll call for anyone who would like to speak in support. Anyone in favor of the application? Seeing no one, anyone in opposition? No one. Mr. Hisney, anything further?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Horner?
Thank you, Ms. Finch. I would just note briefly that we have agreed to the buffer screening condition, which is 10-foot buffer, in addition to 6-foot hedge. We agreed to the no outside speakers. We're capping the buildings at 35 feet, and we have over 10.8 acres of open space, just to guide you in your approval recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. With that, we'll close special use 19-1332 and go to the next case. Mr. Grady.
The next item then is agenda item D1. It's rezoning application standard 19-1431. The applicant is Apollo Beach 41 LLC. The request is a result from AI agricultural and industrial to commercial general with restrictions. Chris Grand-Leonard will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
Good evening.
Ms. Finch. Good evening, Ms. Finch, one more time. Michael Horner, 14502 North Dale Mabry Highway, representing the applicant and owner, Apollo Beach 41 LLC, who are the applicants and ownership interests on this case. I'm going to be brief. It's fairly straightforward, Ms. Finch. It's an isolated tract. It's a remnant. It's 0.82 acres. It's north of Big Bend Road, just directly abutting the CSX railroad line. It's in the urban service area. It's currently zoned AI, which allows some quasi-light industrial uses, but it's still in an ag district designation. It is in the UMU plan sector, although I think that UMU is getting picked up only because of the property appraiser's office extending that south property line. I'm going to file a survey. It's not a great copy, but it's a survey that reflects that has been lessed out, that we don't own that property anymore, and therefore I think all of this property is 100% in the CMU. This application comes to you with full recommendations of approval, findings of consistency from the Planning Commission regarding all goals, objectives, and policies of the future land use element. We have no objections from any review agencies. We have no wetlands on site. I'm not aware of any opposition at all on this site. I did get a few calls from the townhome community to the east. They just want to make sure we weren't doing anything that was going to generate a significant amount of traffic. And we certainly have agreed to that by going through some restrictions that we offered voluntarily. Those restrictions are, Ms. Finch, we're capping building height at 35 feet. There'll be no fast food drive-through restaurants on this property. No convenience stores with gas pumps, no sexually oriented businesses, and no gun sales. I would note the townhome community to the east is separated by a single lane drive aisle as well as single loaded parking. Plus they have an extended landscape buffer that protects them from the Western Railroad line as well, and that carries through. We do have limited frontage. We have met with Mr. Williams, Public Works, and obviously we cannot deny access to this property, but we've agreed to locate that access drive as far east as possible. We have light industrial zoning to the west. We have a large PD to the south, which is mixed use. We are asking for no variations, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
No, you touched, my only question I think is just to the Planning Commission about that UMU 20, as I didn't
Yes.
see that as well.
It's a little bit of a quirk, but the survey will reconcile that.
Okay, thank you so much. Development Services. Good evening.
Good evening. Chris Graumenar, Development Services. The request is to rezone a vacant parcel totaling .82 acres from AI, agricultural intensive, to CG restrictive, commercial general restricted. The applicant proposes to restrict the building height to 2 stories, 35 feet in height, as well as preclude fast food restaurants with drive-through, convenience stores with gas pumps, sexually oriented businesses, and gun sales. The parcel is located 595 feet northwest of the intersection of Big Bend Road and Kings Crossing Drive within the South Shore community area. The parcel is non-conforming to the current zoning designation with regard to lot size. The applicant seeks to develop the parcel for an array of uses allowed in the CG restricted district. The subject parcel is currently vacant and is bounded to the east by a PD-zoned mixed-use development that contains townhouses, an office park, and retail establishments. To the north and west is bounded by the railroad tracks and vacant manufacturing zone parcels. To the south, it is bounded by major corridor Big Bend Road and vacant parcel zone PD mixed use. The parcel would be adjacent to existing commercial as well as railroad tracks that would better suit commercial uses. Based on the well-established pattern of commercial uses located along Big Bend Road corridor in this area, the introduction of the CG restricted zoning designation is consistent and compatible with the surrounding area, and staff finds that proposed rezoning will not introduce any new incompatibilities. There are no agency objections. Staff finds the request approvable with the following restrictions. Maximum building height shall be 2 stories or 35 feet in height, and the following uses shall be prohibited: fast food restaurants with drive-through, convenience stores with gas pumps, sexually oriented businesses, and gun sales. Glad to answer any questions you may have.
I don't, but thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Planning Commission, please.
Unica Mills Planning Commission staff, the subject property is located within the CMU 12, and it does look like from our maps, the smaller portion that the applicant was referencing, the urban mixed use 20, we also had that that small portion in the urban mixed use 20, but it could be like a Scrivener's error. Sometimes the boundaries kind of jump over.
Right. Okay.
So,
Understood.
yes.
Thank you.
The site is located within the urban service area, as well as the South Shore area-wide systems community planning area. Due to the adjacent railroad tracks and light industrial uses to the west, the commercial zoning district would provide for a compatible transition to the adjacent townhomes that are east of the subject site. The proposed commercial general zoning would also provide for consideration of similar uses within proximity of the subject site along Big Bend Road and would be complementary to the nearby residential community, which would be consistent with policies 1.4, 16.3, and 16.5 of the future land use element. The comprehensive plan encourages employment opportunities along Interstate 75. The commercial general zoning meets the intent of that policy. Policy 36.5 and Objective 36. The applicant is limiting the building height, and with the restriction in place of the building height as well as the restriction of the uses, that would be consistent with policy direction of 16.1 of the future land use element. And based on those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with the future of Hillsborough.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone that would like to speak in support of this application? Seeing no one, anyone in opposition? All right. No one. Mr. Grady, anything further? Mr. Horner?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Then with that, we'll close rezoning 19-1431 and go to the next place.
Next item is agenda item D2, rezoning standard application 20-0044. The applicant is Ashford Villas LLC. The request is to rezone from CN Commercial Neighborhood and RMC 16 Residential Multifamily Conventional to rezoning to RMC 16. Stephen Beachy will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
All right. Good evening.
Good evening, Hearing Officer Finch, Jeremy Couch, 17937 Hunting Bow Circle, Suite 102, Lutz 33558. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Ashford Villas LLC. The property in front of you is a 2-acre parcel that has a split zoning district About 1.33 acres of the parcel is RMC 16, and about 0.66 acres is CN. The applicant would like to do a multifamily development and therefore needs to rezone the CN portion to RM16. The applicant also owns or has ownership interest in the northern area, which is the Fountain Palms Apartments, which is 86 units. Staff found the request consistent with the Land Development Code and the comprehensive plan, and I'm here if you have any questions. Thank
I
you.
don't, but thank you so much. Development Services, please.
Steve Beachy, Development Services. The request is to rezone a 2-acre parcel with a split zoning designation of CN and RMC 16. The applicant is seeking the RMC 16 zoning designation for the entire parcel. Approximately a third of the 2-acre parcel is zoned CN, and 2/3 of the parcel is vacant and already zoned RMC 16. The proximity of the subject parcels to the existing multifamily apartments to the north and west are indicative of compatibility with the existing uses in the surrounding area. Additionally, the subject parcel is located along the Nebraska Avenue transit corridor for Heartline. Development of multifamily residential uses along Nebraska will support transit use in the corridor. Given that approximately 2/3 of the subject parcel is already zoned RMC 16, the designation of the remaining third will not introduce any new incompatibilities to the area. Based on the above, staff finds the request approvable. Any questions, available questions?
Just one minor thing on the front, very front of the staff report, where it says the request, it looks like the RMC 16 is asking for a restriction, but I think that's just a typo, based on everything I've read. On the very front of the staff report.
Oh, yeah, you're right, that's a typo.
It's just
We'll change
a
that.
typo, yeah, I just wanted to point out, but that was it. Thank you so much. Planning Commission.
Unica Mills Planning Commission staff, the subject property is located within the Office Commercial 20 Future Land Use Classification, the Urban Service Area, and the University Area Community Plan. The applicant's request to rezone the site to residential multifamily conventional 16 is consistent and allowable within the Office Commercial 20 Future Land Use Classification. The proposed zoning to RMC 16 would allow for multifamily residential development on the site. The surrounding area is developed with multifamily to the west and north, which is consistent with Objective 12-1 and Policy 12-1.4 of the Community Design Component. The rezoning would also comply with urban service area policies, which call for proactively directing new growth into the urban service area, which is within Objective 1 of the future land use element. The site is also within the boundaries of the University Area Community Plan, which intends for new development and to promote the redevelopment and revitalization of the university area. Based on those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with the future Hillsborough Comp Plan.
All right, thank you so much. Is there anyone that would like to speak in support? Anyone in favor? Seeing no one, anyone in opposition? All right, Mr. Grady? Sir, anything else? All right, then with that, we'll close rezoning 20-0044 and go to the next case.
The next item, agenda item D3, rezoning standard 20-0064. The applicant is Lithia Pinecrest 89 LLC. The request is rezoned from AR agricultural rural to agricultural single-family conventional 1. Tanya Chapello will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
Seems to be your night, Mr. Horner.
It seems so. Spent last one, I promise. Michael Horner, 14502 North Dale Mabry Highway, representing Lithia Pinecrest 89 LLC, who are both the owner and the applicant of this application. With me tonight is Mr. Reed Fischbach, as well as Mr. Matt Henderson, who are representing the ownership interests. They may or may not speak, but I will give the case-in-chief presentation here. Ms. Finch's property is 89.9 acres. It's at the south side of Lithia Pinecrest Road. It is east of Browning Road to the west, and it is west of State Road 39 to the east in the Lithia community. It is zoned AR, acreage residential, 1 unit per 5. It is in the Res 1 land use plan sector. It is in the rural service area, which requires well and septic tank, as well as private utilities. This parcel is, Ms. Finch, in a MAP, significant wildlife habitat area. As you know, that has certain protections and set-asides in the Land Development Code, up to 25% of the site, subject to further review and permitting at plating development. We understand and we accept those restrictions of record. I would just note that we are here with unanimous recommendations of approval. We are consistent with all goals, objectives, and policies of the future land use element. We have no opposition in terms of review agency comments. We have no wetlands on this site. We certainly have significant tree cover, but I would remind you that under agricultural bona fide operations, you are entitled by permit to clear those trees for agriculture operations. The Planning Commission, I believe, filed an amended report that you should receive this evening. The first report appeared to reflect urban service area classifications, and I believe Ms. Hemingway is going to file an amended one that reflects appropriately the rural service area location. We have worked diligently with staff. This has gone through scrutiny of all review agencies. We have no objections from either review agency all the way down the line, including transportation. I would note that this parcel lies in the middle of the Res 1 plan sector. It is not on the edge. It is not on the cusp. South of Lithia Pinecrest, this Res 1 extends substantially to the west and to the east and beyond State Road 39. The staff report highlights a number of developments, rezonings, and trends that are clearly indicative of that transition from AR and agricultural interests to the Res 1, larger lots, but allowing 1 acre lots, both AS1 and ASC1, as well as several PDs that are in the near vicinity that are in fact approved for 1 acre lots. There are Swiftmud lands to the south. By our records and computations, there are approximately 247 acres of land zoned AS1 or ASC1 on lands abutting this property. My office has received no formal objections of record or emails or phone calls. I have received a couple phone calls from property owners in the notice area. As you know, in the rural area, we have to go 500 feet. That indicated they were in support. However, I was just made aware just an hour ago, I suppose, that an email was recently received by a property owner in this area. It's a rather lengthy email. I believe she may be here this evening, so we'll hold those comments for rebuttal once we hear the direct testimony from her. I believe her name was Susan Lewis. Just a note, Ms. Finch, you know 89 acres is a big tract. When you file an ASC1 Euclidean district, or an AS1 for that matter, people have a tendency to take that minimum lot size requirement and divide into the acreage of the application and say you are proposing 89 lots. By the time that we go into engineering and permitting, we have to have stormwater management pond and, of course, the reservation set aside for the upland habitat. Our best engineering conclusion is that we will be lucky to get 50 to 52 lots. We have a couple sketch plans I'm not going to formally show you because this is not a restricted zoning district. Therefore, they're not binding, but I may file those just for your perusal in shaping your recommendation. The traffic comments are fairly straightforward. I would just note that they seem to be excessive by also calculating the number of trip ends based upon the higher lot yield that is physically not possible. So I would suggest to you that notation in the staff report as filed in optics is high by about 38 lots instead of the 50-51, but we certainly understand why they filed that. They have no formal objections, as you're aware of record, and we certainly have to abide by all the platting requirements for stormwater management, swift mud permitting. One drainage engineer that looked at this site said this is a drainage engineer's dream because it's on a ridge. Therefore, you can easily make stormwater runoff and attenuation work by conveying to stormwater ponds, filtration ponds on the perimeter of the site. So we certainly intend to do that. Sidewalks will be required per the platting requirements, both external and internal. And I would just note that there is a fire station within 1 mile to the east. That concludes my presentation, Ms. Finch, unless you have any questions.
Well, I had two. One, I think you began to answer, and that is the effect of the upland habitat area on what you can actually build on this property.
Yes, good question.
And so
it is about
50 lots, you believe?
That's right. It's a
Okay.
significant hit, whether we throw it to the south as a buffer to the swift mud, or along the east, or in conjunction with a stormwater management plan. But we cannot develop within that 25% set aside.
Right. And then my second question was triggered by your testimony tonight, and you referenced the agricultural activity permitted under the ASC1 zoning district as it impacts trees on the property. AR, I'm sorry, under the existing.
Yes.
And so what is your point in explaining that?
Only because the site has such a significant tree coverage that some of the comments that we may hear, we may not hear, might be involving significant tree clearing on a beautiful parcel, which we certainly acknowledge it is. I would just throw that to you for comparison as an opportunity for a bona fide agricultural user, that they would be clearing a lot more trees than
I
our
see.
subdivision.
Under the existing zoning?
Yes, ma'am.
Understood. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Development Services. Good evening.
Good evening. Tanya Chapella, Development Services. The request is to rezone approximately 89.87 acres from AR, Agricultural Rural, to ASC1, Agricultural Single Family Conventional. The surrounding area is comprised of ASC1, AS1, and AR zoning district, which with parcels dedicated to agricultural uses and crops, normally occupied with single-family dwellings or mobile homes. Some lots along Lithia Pinecrest Road to the east are 1 acre or less in size. Along South County Road 39 to the east are Candlewood Acres and Hog Creek Reserve, 2 single-family subdivisions, zone ASC1. To the west, along Lithia Pinecrest Road is Lithia Estates, a single-family subdivision, zone PRS, 02-1349, approved for ASC 1 lot development standards. Staff finds the proposed zoning district, ASC 1, is compatible with the surrounding development and zoning patterns. Hillsborough County School Board staff reviewed the applicant's request and found that Barrington Middle and Newsom High do not have adequate capacity for the proposed development. No other objections were received from the rest of the agencies, and we find that the proposed request is approvable. I'm glad to answer your questions.
I don't have any, but thank you so much. Planning Commission.
Unica Mills Planning Commission staff, the subject property is located within the Residential 1 Future Land Use Classification, the rural area, and the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Community Plan. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property to Agricultural Single Family Conventional 1. This zoning district is consistent with the Residential 1 Future Land Use Classification. The area is a combination of agricultural and residential land uses which are compatible with the applicant's request. The request is consistent with Objective 4 as the subject property is in the rural area, which is reserved for large lot, low-density residential uses. The subject site is comprised of significant wildlife habitat. The rezoning is also consistent with the goals and strategies of the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Community Plan, and based on those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with the future of Hillsborough Comp Plan.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone that would like to speak in support? Anyone in favor? Seeing no one, anyone in opposition? Yes, ma'am, if you could please come forward. While she's coming forward, is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to this case? All right. Good evening. You could start by giving us your name and address.
It's Susan Lewis, and I live at 7440 Lithia Pinecrest Road, and our property, well, the map was up there. We're facing Lithia Pinecrest, right beside it, 10 acres.
Okay.
I've gotten a lot of calls. We didn't get a certified letter or anything, and this was kind of last minute. I've been given information, limited, about the planning of this. We have basically cattle operation on our property, and I'm a registered nurse, but I'm not really a public speaker, so I'll do the best I can. We are zoned agriculture, as is a lot of people. The thing that really concerned me was when my parents' property at 11417, their property backs up to where this property goes from Lithia Pinecrest past our property and forward down 39. At one time when my dad was ill with a brain tumor, we had asked Swift Mud about selling us 40 acres beside my parents' property, and we were told that that would never be for sale unless you just wanted to run cattle on it. You would never be allowed to have a home there. So we were like, we're not going to buy that much property and not be able to build eventually. So then we had the property on Lithia Pinecrest. Well, the almost 90 acres there, Swift Mud wrote us along with the attorneys and said that that land would never be developed, that it would be left in its wildlife state, not even cattle on it, and it would stay agriculture. And because we had thought about maybe buying some of that next to our ranch. And of course, now somebody has purchased the parcel originally on 39 and that 90 acres. After living there since 1997, I can tell you there is multiple wildlife there. I'm not a PETA, I'm not saying nut, but you know what I mean. Ranchers make great use of their land and take good care of their animals. But all the development from fish hawk has brought so many wildlife our way. We have black bear, Florida panther, Florida bobcats, coyotes, unfortunately, because they have killed some of our calves. And we've got 2 bald eagles, hawks, named after fish hawk. We originally know the original owners of Fish Hawk Ranch before it was ever developed. And it has changed the Pinecrest community drastically. I am not against growth, but it is so bad there in the morning. My husband is a state of Florida health inspector. When he pulls out on Lithia Pinecrest, and we're away from Fish Hawk, they're all coming down there. They're going north on 39 to avoid all the Fish Hawk crazy traffic. They're going down 60, or they're going straight to Plant City and getting on I-4, which has caused major traffic everywhere. And now from the bomb area, they're coming that way. So I can't imagine 50 more homes. I don't know who they talked to that didn't complain about it. I talked to Ronald Stevens today and many others that are not happy with it because there are multiple agricultural around there. The people that are right next to us, we did not come and speak against them wanting their agricultural change to instead of one home. Because they were building a house next to us, we knew them, and there was a little house in the front, so they had to have it changed to have both properties on the 9 acres. So it's upsetting. I keep thinking, when are we going to stop this encroachment into agricultural land? Strawberries are grown out there, and Plant City, we're the winter strawberry capital of the world. A lot of cattle operations, and they're clearing land right and left. And right now, Pinecrest is part of Lithia. A lot of people don't understand that concept, but Lithia Pinecrest, we're in the Pinecrest area, even though we have the same SIP as Fish Hawk. I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
That's all right, you're doing fine.
It's just, I'm passionate about this because I've lived there since I was 5 years old. We're from North Carolina originally, but we have seen growth go without paying attention to the roads. I mean, it should have been, Lithia Pinecrest should have been 4-laned from Fish Hawk Boulevard to Brandon, and they wouldn't have had all this. And my husband's seen a drastic change since '09 because he inspects Riverview, Fish Hawk, and Plant City. So he has to drive and all the restaurants, and it's just major. And I just can't imagine. And a lot of people are upset about this. Some of the people I know that live on Spring Song and Cloverleaf already have flooding from that, let's see the name of that, Hawk Creek Reserve. It's getting to be a real problem at the end of Spring Song and Cloverleaf, and that will butt up next to that and cause more flooding, I'm afraid. So anyway.
All right, well, two things. One is, Mr. Grady, have we checked the notice that she was noticed? It's in order?
Yes, she is on the notice list. It's a P.O. box, but she was...
I think they had a wrong P.O. box for us. We also get mail at the 7440, but we didn't get it there.
The list, just for your information, the list is
Okay.
Comes from
obtained
the
from
property
the
appraisers.
property appraiser's
Yeah,
office. That's
I
where
think
they
they
get it.
haven't changed it. We had to change.
And then secondly, the SwiftMud letter you received that talked about the property would never be developed, that's an adjacent property. That's not this property. Is that
They
correct?
told us it was that property because that was one of the reasons we bought that property. We really wanted to buy near my parents on 39, but we thought, well, they're not going to develop this. There's wildlife. It connects to our ranch. And, you know, the sign that they put up on Lithia Pinecrest, I just noticed it today. I would have probably done a lot more up to this point, but it's set back in that wooded area instead of being this way where people are coming and going. It was this way, so you'd have to really be looking into the wooded area to notice it. And I think there's a lot of people that would have came tonight had they known earlier, and also that this is so close to Christmas. We have a retail business in Plant City, and I really needed to be working, but I felt this was important to our community, so.
All right, well, I appreciate your coming down.
We love fish hog. I'm not against fish hog, but it has caused major problems toward Pinecrest. Not only that, I've been in talks with Vern Buchanan about the post office, why they didn't plan a Fish Hawk, Florida address. They come all the way down Lithia Pinecrest, almost 39, to our little post office. They have a 10 out there now. They can't handle it all. So it's just been kind of a nightmare the last few years. That's why so many people are upset. My husband, when he pulls out, they're backed up all the way to the fire station in the morning. That's a pretty long ways for a rural area.
All right, well, thank you
So,
for coming down in your
thank you for
testimony.
listening.
If you could please sign in with the clerk's office. All right, last call. Anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? All right, seeing no one. County staff.
I would just point out if she has questions regarding filing for oral argument, that Fernando Quinones with the county staff is available to answer any questions she may have regarding filing oral argument in order to preserve a right to speak to the board.
And a question about her comments about the SwiftMud, the environmental features and so forth. Do you have any information regarding that?
No, I don't have any information regarding SwiftMud.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Horner, it's time for rebuttal. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Finch. I'll be brief. Michael Horner again for the record. You can tell Ms. Lewis has passion. I read that email that she sent just briefly in the lobby, and I sure wish we had a dialogue. But that's why we send notices a month in advance, Ms. Finch, as you know. And that's why we broadened that notice list to 500 feet. If her address was not correct, I'm so sorry, but we have to go by that certified property appraiser's report address list. So, on that notice, it makes very clear, please, any questions, there's my direct phone number, and at the bottom is my email. And again, we have not received one phone call or one email. Had Ms. Lewis or any of her neighbors, quite honestly, received that and called, we would have been more than happy to just sit down, have a cup of coffee, talk about our plans, and talk about those issues. So it's unfortunate. And as you know, Ms. Finch, we don't send certified letters. They go out proof of mailing. I noticed her comments on the wildlife, and there's no question we have to go through that review. We have done a preliminary assessment. We are pleased that it was not a significant impact issue. There are some traces of wildlife. There's no question. It's 89 acres. But we will go through that process further as we have to, and we have to file those reports to the county. She did indicate that she did support her neighbor to the ASC1 zoning district on 10 acres, and I think that was the right decision for her to make. Other people enjoy this area, and they want to have a similar experience. They love the community, they love the area, they love the rural lifestyle, and my clients want to offer that to other residents as well. In terms of the SwiftMud issue, if I can just clarify, Ms. Finch, SwiftMud cannot dictate controls except for property that they own. I'm sure you understand that. And at one time, SwiftMud did own this property. It was deemed surplus in 2013. So as you know, when a county jurisdiction property is deemed surplus, it goes to a open bidding process, and they offer it to other municipalities first. Hillsborough County refused to purchase this property for a number of reasons. We don't have to go into detail on that. The first sale was canceled by SwiftMud because there was a Tampa Bay Water easement recording. So that was put on hold for a while, and then SwiftMud negotiated the release of that easement with Tampa Bay Water. So then once that was removed, then it was offered again in the market. There were 3 other sealed bids that were received, and my client filed the highest bid under the sealed bid process and was awarded the contract for that property. So he paid dearly for it. He outbid other property owners. He did not take it from SwiftMud. SwiftMud was gracious and received monies for it that went back to their efforts. But I want to make it very clear, there is no restriction of record. There is no requirement that my client can only farm this property and not build any houses. I heard the flooding issue, and as you know, we have to go through a fairly arduous process with stormwater management. We cannot exceed pre-construction discharge levels with our post-construction plans. So while we will certainly have more impervious surface, we have a substantial responsibility, and both SwiftMud and Hillsborough County have adopted drainage criteria. And as I mentioned prior, my case in chief, there is a ridge there. This property essentially will drain downward. We have received off-site drainage from other properties. So those parcels who are recipient of our runoff under the current configuration, unimproved, will now benefit because we will now curtail that off-site runoff. So I think it will be a more positive flooding and draining situation in the after construction scenario. I wish we had spoken earlier. I hate to go to hearings and I hear we had all these concerns and the neighbors, and no one would talk to us when we just ask and encourage. And I even went back to Tanya a couple times and I said, is there anyone that has filed that wants to speak with us? And she said no. And then I saw the email this afternoon. So a pleasure to meet her. We hope to work with her afterwards, but we'll stand on the facts on this case. Thank you, Ms. Finch.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. With that, we'll close rezoning 20-0064 and go to the next case.
The next item is agenda item E2, major mod application 19-1172. The applicant's TC Ventures LLC. The request is for a major modification of existing plan development. Michelle Heinrich will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
Is the applicant here? Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Hearing Officer. For the record, Michael Brooks, 100 North Tampa Street, Tampa, Florida 33602. I have with me here this evening a group that you probably know well. The developer is Rick Harcrow from Greenpoint. Genesis is the planner on this project. The Kevin Minier is here going to give the majority of the presentation. Kyle Thornton, who is the project engineer. Steve Henry is the project transportation consultant. And Mr. Lee Walton as well from Flatwoods Environmental is here to answer any questions that there may be. The project is in approved PD, so this is a major modification, 180304. It's in the RP2 land use category, or the majority of it is, except for a 3-acre area that we call the smokes chimney stack. It is roughly 100 acres, contrary to the typo that's in the agenda. And I would like to hand out a binder for you. We got a copy for the clerk. Kevin will go through the crux of this case. It was essentially an integration of this PD into the Triple Creek, existing Triple Creek Planning Development, integration into the recent or the recently approved PD 0304 to the north and the west. The request did at one point include a request to remove the commercial requirement from this project. And Kevin will go into some of the reasons, just the commercial in the general area. We have since retracted that. It became too challenging. With that, after Kevin's presentation, I will go through some revisions to the conditions that were really triggered by a couple unintended requests that we have, but changes that staff had requested, which they'll explain. So with that, if I may approach, and I'm going to turn the podium over to Kevin Menier.
All right, thank you. Do you have copies for the clerk?
Yes.
Okay.
Where's the rest of the graphics? Just basically the one. Good evening. I'm Kevin Menier with Genesis Half, 1000 North Ashley, Suite 900, downtown Tampa. And I'm assisting TC Ventures in the potential development of this property. We have a very unique situation here where there is a possibility of joining up 3 separate RP2 village projects with an integrated roadway system. And within your package, there is a graphic that shows our parcel as well as the parcel to the west and the parcel to the south. Really? This is the one I'd like to talk to most about tonight. As indicated with the graphic in front of you, the subject site is basically 3 areas with existing borrow pits, also called man-made lakes, within the east, and potential developable areas within the west. The third area is a 100-foot wide corridor connecting to Rodine Road to the north. Since this project was approved last year, an adjacent project to the west was approved. That's PD 09310 Eisenhower Group, with several shared access points along our common boundary, and I believe you were the ZHM that reviewed that. We are proposing no changes to these access points. My client, TC Ventures, owns Triple Creek to the south, which is the largest, in my opinion, the most successful of the planned villages. Triple Creek has a large village center approved for over 240,000 square feet of commercial and office development, as well as the recently approved and opened Dawson Elementary. In a nutshell, our request is 3 simple things. We're going to realign the road system within the subject property to facilitate cross-access to the south. As part of that, the zoning line between the subject parcel and Triple Creek becomes somewhat irrelevant, especially along the south side of the borrow pits, and we intend to plat this area to maximize lot layout efficiencies, ignoring the zoning line, and we would just lay out a unified project from Triple Creek across the southern edge of that lake, those man-made lakes. And we're proposing a condition that allows the lot lines to extend across the zoning line if necessary, when necessary, but with no increase in units within either this project or within Triple Creek. And our third request is to adjust the access points along the Triple Creek subject site boundary to better align with what we're proposing to do with Triple Creek. A companion minor modification providing for these access points has been filed, and it's our intent both will be heard at the same time as this, it will be heard at the same time as this petition at the February 11th Board of County Commission hearing. Tying in these 3 communities will provide a significant benefit to the surrounding community. It will provide a connection from Rodine down to Triple Creek Boulevard. It will provide better access to Dawson Elementary. It will also provide more customers for the Triple Creek Village Center. Again, it's approved for 240,000 square feet of commercial and office uses. And I have another graphic that I've got in your package that shows it is the closest viable commercial to the subject site. It's about a mile away to the south. However, we appreciate staff recommending approval. There were several other things that we were talking about when we first applied, relocating the commercial down to Triple Creek, other things. It turned problematic, and so we withdrew those portions. And so basically, the only 3 things that are in front of you tonight are the 3 things, that connections through Triple Creek and realignment to the road network, and that policy allowing the lots to go across with no increase in number of units. But the key thing is that the only person that can do this project is TC Ventures, because they own Triple Creek to the south. Before then, there was no possibility of connection. So if TC Ventures doesn't develop this project, it basically, these two projects remain to the north, do their own thing, and then Triple Creek does its thing to the south. And if you have any questions or have any questions about the graphics, let me know.
Just one, and that regards your reference to the companion application that's going. Explain that to me again. What is that for?
Within Triple Creek, there are no connections to the north today.
Oh,
and
so this
you
would
have
tie
to
it
do
together.
a minor mod to line up the arrows to the north and south.
I
But as
see.
of the moment, there are no connections between the two. So if Triple Creek's not approved, this doesn't get approved.
I understand. Okay,
and vice
thank you.
versa.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Madam Hearing Officer, a copy of the draft proposed Triple Creek site plan is included as tab E. That has not been fully vetted by staff, but you can appreciate the change in or the addition of the cross-access points there. Quickly go through the table of contents, and then I want to reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal and allow staff to make its presentation. I mentioned that we do have some proposed revisions that are in sub B. I'll come back to those. Those relate to the items in C and D, which are comp plan policies and LDC provisions related to density and open space. There is in tab F, there is the agency review from transportation, that we were not proposing any change in density with this application. Also included in this backup is the administrative variances and the design exceptions that were prepared by Steve Henry and approved by the county. As I mentioned, there is a draft prop share agreement that has been executed by Mr. Harcrow, and we're hopeful that goes on the January agenda. And then lastly is sub H is backup from the adjacent PD 190301, which I believe you did hear, as Mr. Muneer said, and it was as we were in the room that day, it was unanimously approved by the Board of County Commissioners, based essentially very favorably reviewed on its interconnectivity. So with that, I'd like to reserve the rest of the time.
Let me just ask you one quick question. When you first started, you mentioned there's an acreage issue on the agenda.
There is, and I will allow staff to explain this, but the project was originally approved for 283 units. Staff believes that it made an error in that calculation, and I'm going to allow them to address that, and then I'm going to explain why I think that they're mistaken, that they made a mistake.
All right, fair enough.
Can you please restate your name for the record?
Yes, Michael Brooks.
Development Services, please.
Good evening, Michelle Heinrich, Development Services. As you may know or remember from this application, this is an existing PD that originally envisioned a transfer of density between a northern area called the Rodine Borough Pit and a southern area called the Grove. In the end, that transfer of density was withdrawn by the applicant, so what was approved was essentially two standalone PDs that both operate as planned villages. And tonight's modification is only for the Rodine portion. So there's nothing proposed for the Grove, which is in the Baum community to the south. And also for both of these PDs, they were approved to allow 2 units per acre in exchange for complying with the Plain Village regulations found in the LDC and the comp plan. As I stated, this application is only for the northern area, and that was approved for 283 units. Under tonight's modification, the applicant requests 3 items. First, to allow single-family lots to cross the southern PD boundary and be developed as a unified plan with Triple Creek. Secondly, to modify the internal circulation system, and to do that, what they're proposing is the central north-south road that previously ran between the 2 borough pit areas. They're proposing that to move westward, and then the southernmost east-west road close to the southern border is planned to extend eastward a bit further. So those are the modifications to the internal road network. And lastly, to adjust the cross-access points along the southern boundary to again align with the unified plan that's proposed with Triple Creek. And notwithstanding these changes, transportation and development services staff feel that it still maintains internal and external connectivity, and we did not have any concerns with that. And also, as the applicant stated, which is important, there are a companion PRS, so that these changes we're discussing will be mirrored in the Triple Creek PD. One of the items I think that Mr. Brooks was speaking to, that is a change on here that's not in the applicant's request, but you'll see in the changes, is that we have reduced the total amount of units by 12. The reason for that is in the northern Plain Village, the Rodine Borough Pit, it has about 4 acres that's in Res 4 and in the urban service area. The remaining acreage, which is a little over 177 acres, is in the rural service area in RP2. When this was originally done, we did not catch that we were blending the 12 units in the urban area into the rural area. And in other Plain villages, we have found that the comprehensive plan does not permit that. So we did advise the applicants at the beginning, which of course they're not too pleased with, that we wouldn't have to correct that oversight. So our conditions do reduce the amount of total units by 12.
Let me ask you, so I understand your argument, but do they, the units aren't lessed out, they're just not allowed to be in the urban service area, is that correct?
They're not allowed to be placed into the RP2 rural service area.
Oh,
So
as a
those
part of the
12
planned village
Yeah, so
concept, I see.
those 12 were picked up and moved across that imaginary line.
I see.
And we have found out in the comp plan language is quite clear that that is not supposed to be occurring. So knowing that that was done, we're correcting that during this modification.
Understood.
Also, I would just state that the reviewing agencies, including transportation, have reviewed this and have no objections. And staff does recommend approval, subject to proposed conditions. I do have a revision to provide to you, and it's also been provided to the applicant. And what that does is it corrects the residential development area to not count the village node, which was previously included in our calculations. So I have that to provide to you. And then lastly, we have, I did receive the applicant's proposed changes late this afternoon, so we're aware of them. And I can certainly speak to more specifics as the applicant speaks to those, but both myself and I believe Planning Commission staff do not support those changes and would go forward with our proposal.
Are they changes to the conditions?
Yes.
I see. All right. And
we'll be happy to speak to those if you have any questions afterwards, but primarily it is not wanting to reduce the 12 units, so putting that back, and also utilizing a open space requirement that is not consistent with the comprehensive plan's definition done in RP2 villages. And we'd be happy to elaborate on that if you'd like.
Well, I'm just receiving them as well, so I'll look at that. I did have one quick question.
Sure.
The new zoning condition 1.2 talks about that blending of lot sizes between this property and the property to the south of PD. And it talks about these lots shall follow the development standards and any additional supplemental requirements of the PD assigned to for accounting purposes. So somebody tracks which PD they come out of. My question was, for those approved lots that are in Triple Creek to the north, are they of comparable size to the southern lots here?
Yes.
I
When we
see.
looked at that, they are very similar, if not the same.
Okay.
Because like the other ones, a planned village, so they utilize the smaller lots. There might be a few subtle changes, which is why we thought it best, whichever it's assigned to, that would make it an easy decision.
I see. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Planning Commission.
Unica Mills Planning Commission staff, the subject site is located within the Residential Plan 2 as well as the Residential 4 future land use classifications. The site is located within the rural as well as urban service area. The site is also located within the Riverview and South Shore area-wide systems community planning areas. The proposed use is consistent with and allowable within the residential Plan 2 classification, with a maximum of approximately 77.4 acres of developable acreage and a request of the 271 single-family residential units. The applicant would be providing approximately 99 acres of open space, which is consistent with the policy direction of 14.2 and policy 33.5, which requires a minimum of 3.5 clustering ratio. The subject site contains over 25% wetlands. As such, the parcel has to be calculated based on environmentally sensitive land credit, which would be consistent with policy 13.3 of the future land use element. The previous plan development, 18-0304, was approved for 283 single-family units. However, it was improperly permitted. As per policy 8.8 of the future land use element, the blending of densities and intensities cannot occur between the urban service area and the rural area. The portion of the site that is within the urban service area totals 3 acres, which would allow for consideration up to 12 units. These 12 units were misappropriated, being that this portion of the site is located within the urban service area. The proper entitlement for the site is 271 single-family residential units. Once an application is amended, staff has to review the current facts of the case against the adopted plan language, and in this case, staff reevaluated the site based on comprehensive plan policy 8.8, which does not allow blending between the urban service area and the rural area. The residential units will be of a minimum lot size of 4,400 square feet. These smaller lot sizes within the planned village is consistent with RP2 future land use category, which requires clustering in order to prevent sprawl. This is consistent with policy direction of policy 33.6 of the future land use element. The applicant is meeting the village node requirement by providing approximately 3,600 square feet of non-residential uses, which is consistent with policy direction of 33.10. Achieving road connectivity is an important component of planned villages. The site plan demonstrates road connectivity in multiple locations, meeting the intent of future land use element policy 33.11. The application supports the vision of the Riverview Community Plan by developing in a manner that provides attractive residential development that complements the surrounding character of the area. And based on those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed major modification consistent with the future of Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan for unincorporated Hillsborough County, subject to conditions proposed by Development Services.
Let me just ask you a quick question about that blending the 12-unit issue. So there was no change in the line of the urban service area. It was just a mistake.
That is correct. There was no change in the urban service area boundary.
Okay, so that 2+ acres, that's in the urban service area, and incorrectly 12 units were derived from that and put into the planned village concept.
That is correct.
I see. Thank you very much. All right, we'll call for anyone that would like to speak in support. Anyone in favor? Seeing no one. Anyone in opposition? Yes, sir. Would you like to speak? Opposition, yes, sir. All right, while they're coming up, is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to this application? All right. If you could start by giving us your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Carol McDowell. I live at 12528 Lovers Lane, Riverview, 33579.
Thank you.
My property is backed by Triple Creek to the south and Rodine's dirt pit, or whatever you call it now, to the north. Big Ben is supposed to go to Lithia Pinecrest. Okay, it is you just can't drive in the area anymore, and the streets, forget it. They haven't fixed the streets in 5 years. Maybe once a month they'll fill the potholes, especially on Lovers Lane in Greenland. You have it break an axle just trying to get down the street, and this is going to give us so much more traffic. It's only Lovers Lane is only a 2-lane highway, and it's all single-family homes, and it's 1 unit to an acre. And now they're going to do 2 units to an acre behind us. This doesn't make any sense to the people that lived in the area for 50 years. You know, and I don't know how we can honestly fight it.
All right. Does that complete your comments?
That's it.
Thank you so much. If you could please sign in with the clerk's office.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? All right, seeing no one. County staff.
Just the note for the record again, if the person who spoke has questions regarding filing oral argument, they preserve the right to speak to the Board of County Commissioner. Fernando Quinones is available to answer any questions they may have.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Brooks, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. May I have my reserved time possibly, if
Well,
needed?
we'll see where we go.
Okay. So the revised conditions, which are tab B, were essentially driven not by request, but by, as you heard from the staff, re-review of this petition. And the crux of them are basically changing the density back and changing the acreages for the development parcel and the open space. With regard to number 5, staff had changed the time for the 75% confirmation that the residential had been developed from the time of building permit to the time of platting. I can appreciate why that might be a easier accounting system, but that's not what the code says. The code says building permit. We did not ask for that change, and so we're asking that that remain the same. But with regard to the blending of density, Planning Commission is correct. 8.8 does say that you are not to blend density across contiguous parcels between the urban service line. What we have discussed with the Planning Commission, though, is the second policy that's in that same tab, which is 1.9, which is properties that are split by the USA. A distinct difference between this PD and the PD that you heard earlier this year is that this parcel is given, with all of its unique and quirky shapes, is a parcel of record that existed prior to July 26, 1989, and the deeds have been provided in the backup for that. As we read this is a bright line test. It was intended to recognize that there were parcels of record that had urban service lines that were drawn through them, and that this test establishes whether your parcel is deemed to be within the urban service area or in the rural service area. And in this particular case, this property does not meet the test for being in the urban service area. And the conclusion of that policy is that if none of the criteria have been met, the property will be considered part of the rural area. And so based on that, it was our reading and in fact our understanding of vesting law, and the reason that you have provisions like this for properties and configurations that existed prior to the comprehensive plan is that this, again, provides a bright line test. When you apply this, whether you think of this as the boundary moving around the parcel or disappearing across the parcel, however you get there, the parcel becomes either one or the other. You don't get a split scenario the way you do, say, and again, with an assemblage where you're not dealing with this unique situation. I've also included some backup from the most recent amendment to 8.8, which was a change that confirmed that you can't blend across right-of-ways, and that was 12-23. I mean, one of the things that 12-23 tells us in the Planning Commission's own report is that the purpose of 8.8 is to ensure compatibility. This is a case where we're moving 12 units, and Madam Hearing Officer, in all due respect, while it may seem like a few amount of units, it is a considerable value considering that there is a roadway being built all the way from Rodine down to the developable area of the parcel. And so those 12 units have significant value and were a material part of the deal when Mr. Harcrow put this property under contract. Lastly, there are additional comprehensive plan policies that we've added for your consideration, essentially that deal with the value of having urban density. I mean, if the Planning Commission's position is correct, we have just thrown urban density onto the ground. There's nowhere to use it. And so if you move it down into the RP2, into the development pocket, closer to Triple Creek, there is nothing incompatible about that. And so for all those reasons, we think 1.9 is the way to go here. And you've got two policies that we believe that 1.9 applies and Planning Commission believes 8.8 applies.
So the property, the subject property is in the same configuration, size, shape as it was prior to July 26th of 1989?
That is correct, Madam.
All right. So let me just stop right there and have the Planning Commission weigh in on Mr. Brooks' assertion regarding this policy.
The applicant has brought this to our attention, but there has not been any evidence that's been submitted to the Planning Commission to prove that the site was there since 1986 to take it through all of these bullet points to see that it actually
is. Now, I understand he submitted this document here at the hearing, which presumably has backup information in it that none of us have seen.
Okay.
Is that something that you would take back to the Planning Commission and consider, that perhaps a continuance or something might be in order if you're trying to resolve this issue?
Madam Hearing Officer, while these deeds were, the second deed was not part of the original submittal, in multiple conversations with the Planning Commission, they made it very clear that they did not believe that whether this was a parcel of record or not, that it superseded 8.8.
What is the second deed?
The second deed is the one that gets you back prior to 1989.
Oh, that
Yeah,
gets
right.
behind that time.
Right.
I see.
So I don't, my conversations with the Planning Commission don't lead me to believe that we're going to have any different conclusion.
So there's no benefit from, in your opinion?
I mean, you can ask the Planning Commission, but I think they were very clear about what their opinion was.
Ms. Mills, is there, do you think there's an opportunity to review additional information that might change the Planning Commission's position on this issue?
I do not. Based on 8.8, to me, that policy clearly reads that you can't blend between the urban and rural area. So,
all right.
And we've had multiple conversations with the applicant regarding that.
And also, you've had conversations with them about policy 1.9?
Yes,
as well.
We've had a conversation about policy 1.9.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, go forward then, Mr. Brooks.
Okay. I'm not personally aware of 1.9 ever having been involved in a case that I have worked on. It's a very unique policy, and I have given examples of if it were reversed. I mean, would we require the extension of public services into what would otherwise be a rural area with rural density? It's a conclusion that I can't quite seem to round that square.
And this issue obviously didn't come up as a part of the original zoning because the units were assigned.
As part of the original zoning, I'm
When
sorry?
the original plan development zoning, this issue wasn't raised at that time.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I believe Mr. Scarola heard this case. It was remanded at least a couple times. There were at least 2, maybe 3 staff reports. It was analyzed to death, and the recommendation from both staffs were 283. And as I said, Mr. Harcrow relied on that. We were somewhat taken aback when this became an issue.
All right. And if I could, while you were, the other issue regarding the timing, let me go back to your changes of conditions regarding the building permits versus the plating issue. Remind me which condition that is.
Yes. That is...
Condition 5.
Yeah, condition 5, and that is Madam Hearing Officer, you refer to 50402 sub D, that talks about 75% at certificates of occupancy.
All right, let me just ask staff for a minute on that. Mr. Grady or Ms. Heinrich, what was the reason for the change of that?
Development Services, Michelle Heinrich. The reason for that change is Mr. Brooks is correct. That is how it reads in the Plain Village requirements. The Plain Village requirements, which have been in effect for quite some time, really are only starting to come on board recently. As they've come on board and we have encountered implementing that, it has been raised to us the concern of that trigger being handled by a building permit tech and a home builder, possibly two people who are completely unaware of that requirement, and it can very easily be overlooked and mistakenly permitted to go forward. So what our director and other Plain Village applicants have agreed to is that it would be better if we address that at time of plating.
Is this something that's proposed to be changed in the Land Development Code at a future date?
I would think that is something that is probably going to be looked at. As you know, we are in a moratorium right now on the RP2 projects. I certainly think that is an issue that's going to come up.
And you mentioned that other applicants have agreed to this change?
Yes.
I see. All right, thank you so much. All right, Mr. Brooks.
Madam Hearing, to that point, yes, and I acknowledge that I agree that there may be a simplicity issue at stake here, but as you might also appreciate from our perspective, there have been a lot of changes thrown at us that we didn't ask for. So we either follow the code or we don't follow the code, and that's all we were asking for. Lastly, with regard to open space, this is we proposed a condition which is condition, or in addition to condition 1.1. This did come up as a result of our conversations in more detail about how the open space acreage was being calculated. And we became aware that the staff was not going to count the retention areas on this property. And as we started out, and you've seen from the graphics, this is a very, very unique shaped piece of property. It's heavily impacted by borrow pits, and its developability is challenging as we try to integrate it and make it useful. What we propose, as I understand from staff, is that if you go to, I'm sorry, tab, I lost my place for a moment, tab D, we referred to policy 14.2, which talks about, for purposes of clustering, what counts as open space. And for rural areas, those are conservation areas, preservation areas, mitigation areas, and passive recreational uses such as not but not limited to nature observation and hiking. For the urban service area, there is a slightly different definition that does specifically include stormwater systems, non-vaulted, in their traditional sense. The point that we are making with our proposed change is that if you follow through the sequence of what open space really is, the definition in the comp plan is behind that, the one I just read, which is undeveloped land suitable for passive recreation or conservation uses. You then go into the definitions in the Land Development Code of what open space is, and you begin to kind of fine-tune that down. And particularly, I've highlighted a section in the definition in section 12, which says retention areas are considered open space if they serve as a water feature and are used as a design element within the overall site design. Water features should enhance the overall aesthetic experience of the people on the site and encourage other pedestrian uses, i.e. walks, decks, plazas, and piers. Admittedly, that is a rather verbose definition, but it exemplifies the fact that where you take a retention or a detention area and you turn it into a feature, that can serve as open space. I would agree that the policy would not allow an otherwise plain and ordinary, at least 14.2 as it's written, would not allow a standard detention or facility to be counted. But where you take it and you activate it as part of the community, that is a different scenario. And as an example, I pulled a section right behind that out of the conservation subdivision section, which have had some familiarity with. Ethel Hammer and I many years ago did what I think is still the only conservation subdivision in the county, Lake Toscano down on Southfield Road in Waimama. It is in the rural service area. And if you look at 50907 sub B sub 5, which I put a bar around, this is exactly that concept, where you take a stormwater facility and you integrate it into the trail systems, much like Mr. Harcrow has done through Triple Creek and Fish Hawk and the other developments he's been involved with. You can turn a otherwise ordinary retention facility into open space, meaningful open space. And so with our condition, we have proposed to do exactly that.
Is the amount that is no longer being recognized, that's the difference between the 102 to the 99.5? Is that the acreage we're talking about?
We don't have, because we don't have final, this is another part of why we're debating points like this. This site has not been finally engineered, so we don't know exactly what the drainage areas are going to be. The density is kind of a moving target right now. We're beginning to hone down on the layout, and we have, obviously everybody thinks that the interconnectivity is a great idea, but we have some challenges with regard to the design. I don't believe that this issue changes the numbers that are in the conditions, right? The 80.8 that we proposed is derived by backing in 283 or 3.5 clustering into 283. The remainder is the open space. And so all we have said with regard to that condition that we've added to 1.1 is that part of the open space should include a retention facility that has been activated in the way that condition provides.
I see. So I'm just catching up. So the reference in condition 1.2 to comp plan policy 14.2, that's your contention that it's different in that it qualifies, that policy distinguishes between the rural and the urban service area, leaving that retention out.
In fact, that's a great point, is that the reason for what might otherwise be thought of as a late addition is that when policy 14.2, we began to look at that and talk to staff about what that meant, we began to realize that they did not believe that drainage facilities fell within that definition.
Right. I get it.
So we clarified that. With that, I said we've got Mr. Henry, who would love to talk about design exceptions and variances in the roadway. But obviously a key component here that Kevin touched on, not only the interconnectivity, but the ability to get as an alternative means from Triple Creek Boulevard to Rodine Road without going out to Ball. And that is going to be a significant benefit to Dawson, which is the existing school in Triple Creek, a potential school that will be off Rodine Road in the adjacent PD, all of which will provide a roadway network that then interconnects that entire area.
And for the record, I just want to ask you that there are no increase in units from what's already approved in either project. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. And in fact, good questions with regard to the blending provision. This is something that we've used in other PDs, and you may have seen this. Little Harbor was an example of where we took this language and massaged it a little bit. But same concept where you have two PDs that are adjacent, but the lots blend. You just have to choose which side it goes on, and the development standards go with those.
Understood. Ms. Heinrich, did you have something you wanted to add? Is that to the point of the retention issue?
Yeah, I was just being available if you had any questions or if you wanted staff comment on that.
Just while you're here, I apologize for interrupting that flow, but the reference to 14.2 makes a distinction between the rural service area, and perhaps it's more appropriate to the Planning Commission, but makes it, and you can weigh in as well, makes that distinction, but this is in the rural service area for the most part, correct?
Correct, and that's where all of these numbers are taken from. So it's been confirmed numerous times, and then also this morning with Unica Mills, that the stormwater detention areas do not count as open space. As we've pointed out, these stormwater areas, if we were to utilize them also as open space, then they would be used for both density and open space. So I believe that is most likely the reason why it is excluded in the rural service area and in the Plain Villages, which are in the rural service area, because the purpose is to create an overabundance of open space in exchange for a maximum density, which will be compatible with the surrounding areas, which are also low density because they will be internalized and clustered. So I understand Mr. Brooks's reasoning for this type of condition. However, the Plain Village requirements, which he's asking to adhere to, in the comp plan language, is what guides us to keeping the condition as it is. And I will note that it seems like some of this conditions from the PD to the west of them, which we did create, which spoke to the vistas for the lots. It wasn't to provide them with more open space.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Ms. Mills, I'll give you the last word on
Right.
that issue.
I was just going to agree with Michelle. Everything she said was correct. There is a distinction between the rural and urban service area as far as what can count towards stormwater, as open space.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Brooks? We've kind of gone off a field, but because these issues were raised at the last minute, I've got to allow the staff an opportunity to weigh in. So if you could conclude your rebuttal, however you see fit.
Yes, I wanted to make clear for the record that while there is an RP2 moratorium, this particular project, and you may know this, Madam Hearing Officer, this project was filed prior to that moratorium being filed, and then the moratorium was subsequently reduced to just the Balm area. So this is both not covered and now no longer within that area. Just wanted to clarify that for the record. With regard to the open space, what that does effectively is, it doesn't change the development area. It reduces the size of the lots, in effect, right? Because you've got now have to create, you now can't use certain land, or you have to use certain land for this increased open space requirement. When the drainage facilities, as they've been enhanced, are already providing that. And so what you're doing is you're decreasing the size of the lot. Ultimately, if you're ever going to achieve the density, I just don't see why this is a big deal. The Planning Commission and the staff have found this to be consistent. They found it to be consistent with the 283 units. I just don't see why compatibility or consistency is an issue with this change. Lastly, I think I'm going to ask Kevin Menier to just speak to the folks who live nearby in Tropical Acres. And with that, I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you so much.
Kevin Menier, Genesis. The people, I understand, lived on Lover's Lane, which is a road to the west of us in Tropical Acres. With the approval of this project and the companion minor mod, we will be creating a parallel road to the north-south Lover's Lane Road. So I'm sorry about issues of traffic, but with this connection, things should be better. More of the people that need to visit Dawson, that need to visit the Triple Creek Village Center, will be using those roads. They won't have to go into roads to the neighborhood to the west of us, but only if this gets approved.
Understood.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Then with that, we'll close major modification 19-1172 and go to the next case.
The final item on tonight's agenda is agenda item E3, major mod 19-1297. The applicant is Madam A. Tampa Sarasota LLC. The request is for a major modification of existing plan development. Israel Monsanto will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
Good evening.
Good evening, Cammie Corbett, 101 East Kennedy Boulevard, Suite 3700. We are here for this major modification for the applicant, Madam E. Homes. The project is located at 8501 Gun Highway. The future land use is Citrus Park Village, and it's part of the Northwest Community Plan and the Citrus Park Village Overlay. And the current zoning is planned development. The last modification to the zoning was in 2016, which allowed for up to 80 single-family homes. Those are rear-loaded homes with a very odd configuration of sidewalks in the rear yard. That approval contained waivers to the design standards, and it did not contain a connection to Bingham Court. And we're going to talk a lot more about Bingham Court as we go through this evening. The proposed modification is proposing up to 80 townhomes. Those will be multifamily attached product. They will be front-loaded. The applicant is actually proposing alternative design standards that will help achieve a traditional neighborhood design. They're different than a complete waiver to the standards. We're asking for alternative design standards. And we are showing the connection to Bingham Court. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Just wanted to orient you to the site constraints.
Excuse me, Ms. Corbett, are you doing a PowerPoint presentation?
Oh,
Because
shoot. Is
it's
it not
not,
showing?
it's not showing, so I don't know.
I see nothing, sorry.
Yep,
Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Okay. So we'll go back.
Oh, hang on a minute. It just went blank. 1 second. There you go.
Sorry. My client doesn't like people fumbling with technology, and here I am fumbling with technology. Apologies, Tom. This was the prior slide from the prior PD. This is the current PD, and these are the site constraints. There is a fixed location for the entrance. There are wetlands, significant wetlands on site. There are electrical transmission lines running both east and west, north and south. And there's also required floodplain compensation on the site. And the reason that it's important to orient you to that, it's those site constraints that are driving the requested waivers and the alternative design standards. We are asking for complete waivers for the block pattern and the grid pattern and street design because of the limited development envelope. We have limited ability to design this site in a block pattern. For the alternative design standards, instead of asking for complete waiver, we went through and made the minimal adjustments necessary that would allow us to address the site constraints and practical concerns, but still achieve a traditional neighborhood design. Those are outlined more fully along with the justifications in the record in the project narrative and then also in Mr. Monsanto's staff report. And rather than read them to you all, we thought the best way to demonstrate what the end result would be was to show you visually what the practical effect will be. And this is a video, 3D animated video showing the design of the project, both the streetscape and the architectural features that will result. And that's and then these are just some stills of the similar product we included in case the video didn't work. And then, as you can see, the alternative design standards implement the vision and strategy of the community plans by orienting the homes towards the streetscape, eliminating cul-de-sacs, providing architectural controls for building design, lighting, and signage, also providing a traditional neighborhood design of roads and sidewalks and safe pedestrian connections. We do have recommendations of approval from all reviewing agencies, including Development Services and the Planning Commission. However, there is the issue of the Bingham Court connectivity that has been raised. We had been contacted by the neighborhood and who has indicated that they still strongly object to a connection. to Bingham Court. When we filed our site plan, we did not show that connection. We wanted to only change the things that were necessary to gain approval for Mattamy for their product. But in the review process, both Development Services and Planning Commission said that in order to gain their support, we would have to provide the connection. So we're somewhat caught in the middle. We sympathize with the residents, but we're being told it's required by the code, and so we are providing it. We think that this modification is approvable with or without the connection. In 2016, the Board of County Commissioners made a determination that development of this parcel for 80 single-family units was approvable as consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land development code with no connection. It's approvable as staff has conditioned, and we're going to leave it to your professional opinion as to whether the substantial competent evidence in the record this evening supports maintaining no connection, provides for opening up the connection, or something in between, perhaps with emergency access only. And with that, we would conclude our presentation and save time for rebuttal, and I'd like to submit some additional, just a copy of the hard copy and the electronic copy of the PowerPoint into the record, please.
Thank you. Development Services. Good evening.
Good evening, Israel Monsanto, Development Services. I'll go to the overhead project. Before I start, I will hand out a revised staff report. You will have condition number 9, transportation conditions, being slightly updated. There were some tweaks made to it for clarification purposes. I'm going to hand this out. As the applicant stated, this plan development is currently zone CPV E2 and is subject to the conditions found in Measure Mod 16747. The applicant seeks to modify it in order basically to change the unit types. There is an access point of Gun Highway to the west, and the applicant is also proposing to connect to the east. The subject site is in the Citrus Park Village sub-area E, which requires a development of a well-balanced, vital, pedestrian-oriented traditional village that can support a variety of residential, commercial, offices, and civic uses. It's located in the urban service area, and the maximum density is 9 dwelling units per the acres. As also stated, the PD today is approved for a maximum of 80 detached single-family units. The zoning hearing master and the board did not require the connection to Bingham Court to the east, although Development Services and Transportation staff and the Planning Commission required it at the time of the rezoning in 2016. Waiver from the Citrus Park Village development standard found in the Land Development Code 310 were also requested as part of that major modification, and they were approved. Some of those waivers were to place the porches and stoops to the back of the building, and there is an approved alleyway in the back. So these are rear-loaded products. The reason for the waivers being requested at that time was because of the wetland present in the site, and also utility power lines crossing the site east, west, and also north to south. The request today will basically, in essence, change the residential units from detached to attached. The number will remain the same, a maximum of 80 units. The applicant also proposes connections to Bingham Court to the east and the main access of Gun Highway to the west. The waivers, again, are similar to those requested in the original major modification in 2016. However, in this case, the homes will be fronting the streets. The cul-de-sac is being eliminated, and there is a building design proposed, which is part of the certified parcel, and that was not part of the major mod in 2016. The project will be consistent with the design depicted in the general plan, which is also going to be certified. And conditions are proposed for finished floor, stoops, windows, garages, ceiling height, and facades, among others. The roads will be private, but there will have a public easement, so the county and the public have complete access to those roads. There was the road will be less than 50 feet in width. Therefore, the applicant submitted a design exception, and the county engineer approved it after review of the design exception. Staff does not object to the waivers being requested. The overall design of the units is consistent with the Citrus Park Village intent to provide a variety of residential units and products. The alternative standards to accommodate a multifamily product is mostly dictated by site constraints, by wetlands and power line, which is similar to the currently approved PD conditions. Again, the proposed site and building design are a result of the constraints imposed by the site, which are covered by more than 30% of wetlands and the power lines crossing the site. Staff review the waivers and the alternative design and find the justifications to be reasonable. The Bedford Place Homeowners Association has submitted a letter in opposition stating the same concerns brought up in the 2016 major modification. Additionally, Development Services has received other letters from residents of the subdivision to the east. In the letter, residents are concerned about vehicular and pedestrian connection to the east being proposed and how traffic potentially moving through their neighborhood could have safety implications. Transportation staff has acknowledged their concerns. However, the proposed connection to Benham Court to the east needs to be in place to be consistent with the community plan and the code requirements of the Citrus Park Village regulation for connectivity and roadway network. The applicant has proposed a road design that would address some of the concerns presented at the major mod in 2016. And in this current major modification, as indicated in the staff report, in the transportation staff report, staff finds that the proposed changes to the PD meet the intent of the Citrus Park Village community plan, as well as the land development code. The overall site design will result in homes fronting the street and providing sidewalks and connections to surrounding road and pedestrian network. Therefore, the proposed project would produce a site with standards and a development pattern that is more consistent with the Citrus Park Village community plan compared to the existing PD. No objections were received by other reviewing agencies, and based on all those considerations, we recommend approval with conditions. And I'm available if you have any questions.
I do. Regarding the access to Bingham Court. So let me just make sure I have the historical piece of this. The original PD back to 89, and then what seems next significant was that major modification in 2016.
Correct.
Did staff recommend the connection to Bingham Court through either of those petitions?
The original PD in 89 was approved for I believe, a nursery, planned nursery, commercial uses. Now, when it came to the major mod in 2016, that was the first time that connection was proposed.
All right. And did staff recommend the access then?
Yes, staff, Development Services, Transportation, and the Planning Commission found that connection to be necessary.
And then both the zoning hearing master and the board said no to
Correct.
that access based on probably the residents' concerns.
Yes. Also, if you will go through the record, the zoning hearing master found in his findings reasoning why not to require that connection to the east.
In the 2016 modification?
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
Fair enough. I'll read that. All right. And what is the position, maybe you want to defer to transportation, but what is the position on having that be an emergency access rather than a full access point?
Right. Transportation condition came from, Aya Yassini from transportation staff. If you want, you can ask that question directly.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Hearing Master. My name is Aya Yassin with Development Services Transportation. I have an updated transportation report with updated conditions, and I noticed that the ITE code number that was included for the proposed zoning for trip generation was just incorrectly, but the right code, the right ITE land use code for the trip generation was used. However, it was just reported incorrectly in the report.
All right. And the issue about access to Bingham Court, you're recommending the connection?
We are recommending a full connection, at the least an emergency connection. Initially there were raised of the speeding, and therefore we proposed some speed reduction features to the road. with that connection, so that and it will speed chicanes to reduce the lanes from 2 lanes to 1 lane, so that the cars will definitely slow down.
All right, thank you so much, I appreciate
And
it.
it's included as one of the conditions that the new conditions that we proposed.
Perfect, if you submit it into the record. Terrific. All right, Planning Commission, please.
Unica Mills Planning Commission staff, the subject property is located within the Citrus Park Village Sub-Area E, Mutual Land Use Classification, the Urban Service Area, and the Citrus Park Village, as well as the Northwest Hillsborough Community Planning Areas. The proposed request for townhomes is an allowable use and is consistent with the Citrus Park Village Sub-Area E Mutual Land Use Classification. The approximately 23.81 acre property is comprised of 7.62 acres of wetlands and 16.19 acres of uplands. The site is comprised of more than 25% wetlands. Consequently, the subject property's allowable maximum density would be 182 units, which will be consistent with policy 13.3 of the future land use element. The application states achieving a density greater than 80 units would significantly impact wetlands. Planning Commission staff agrees that a density greater than 80 units would have an adverse impact on environmental features on the site, and that application meets the intent of policy 1.3 of the future land use element. The site plan for the proposed project shows connection points to Gunn Highway to the west and Bingham Court, the development to the east. This satisfies the vision and intent of the Citrus Park Village Community Plan, as well as the Northwest Hillsborough Community Plan, which speaks to requiring new development to be designed with a continuous local network of roadways characterized by short blocks with minimal use of cul-de-sacs. And based on those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed major modification consistent with the future Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan.
All right, thank you so much. Is there anyone that would like to speak in support? Yeah. Not yet, not yet. That's okay, that's okay. Eager. All right, anyone that would like to speak in support? All right, seeing no one that wants to speak in support, now we'll call for people that want to speak in opposition. If you could go ahead and come forward. While he's coming up, is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? Yes, if you could go ahead and come forward, it speeds up the process. Yes, sir, if you could start with your name and address.
Excuse my attire. My name
That's
is
all right.
Maurice Johnson, Burkford Place resident, 7730 Cedarhurst Lane. My property is right there on the corner of Bingham and Cedarhurst. As a personal plea, my goal here is really to preserve my value of the home and also the serenity of the community. This connection absolutely serves no convenience and it doesn't benefit anyone. What I mean by that is, as it relates to that outlet, if you're coming from this new community, as it relates to this particular outlet, you only have one direction to go in, and that's towards Odessa. Outside of that, it is not convenient to get to Sheldon. It's not convenient to get to the Veterans Expressway. It's not even convenient to get to Citrus Park Mall. It serves no purpose to make it a major roadway at all. Speaking of random, those who are randomly commuting who decides to not exit but enter that particular road, you're talking about driving through a community where you have to basically, it's not going to expedite your commute. So you're talking about driving through a community. Burkford Place has several speed bumps before you get to a stop sign. And if you do decide to take this route, your only option is going left because there's no point for you to go right, considering if you're on Gunn Highway, you're keeping straight anyway. So opening this up to the, to traffic, it's just, number one, is going to affect the community. And number two, it doesn't serve to be convenient or beneficial to anyone. That's my argument.
Thank you for your comments. If you could please sign in. Next, please. Good evening.
Hi. My name is Sharon Secretan, and I live at 7707 Bingham Court. And I am also opposed not to the development of the townhomes, but to the connectivity of Bingham to Gunn Highway. And I'm really concerned about the safety of the roads, in our neighborhood, because right now, the way it is, the HOA is having to send out a lot of notes to all of the community to tell people to get their cars parked off of the road because there's no room to pass. On Bingham Court, if the way people are parking on the street, because there's very limited parking in the driveways, it's just very small road, only one car at a time can pass on that road. So if they open it up to Gunn Highway and you've got all this traffic coming through, only one car can get through at a time. I really feel like there's going to be a lot of accidents in that neighborhood, getting from Bingham around with people cutting through, as the prior gentleman already, discussed. So that is my main concern, is the safety of really the kids in the neighborhood. Also, one of my neighbors on Bingham Court, who could not be here tonight, she asked me that I bring this letter from her with her concerns, and it's the same. It's about the safety of opening up Bingham over to Gun Highway.
All right, you can submit it into the record.
Okay.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank
If you could please sign in. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mark Ott. I also live at 7707 Bingham Court. My concern is that I wanted to bring up is I hear a lot of talk about how Citrus Park needs to be a pedestrian village, plenty of walking. There are existing problems in Burkford Place now. Much of the pedestrian traffic is in the roadway. The driveway design in the neighborhood, which looks similar to what is being proposed for the townhouses, are narrow and short, and cars park 4 deep in the driveways, blocking the sidewalks. There's also a lot of parking on the road, and the sidewalks themselves get flooded in the rains. So there is a lot of pedestrian traffic in the roads, and now you're talking about adding more vehicular traffic to the roads. I'm also concerned about the exit onto Gun Highway by the elementary school, which opens into a school zone. However, there's no way to tell that you're going into a school zone when you exit the road onto Gun Highway. And there are lights on either side that say the school zone is 20 miles an hour, but you cannot tell that when you leave the road and exit onto Gun. And there's already a lot of aggressive, bad driving through the school zone when school zone is in, is 20 miles an hour. And I think people entering onto the school zone without even knowing it, it's just going to make things worse. That's all I had.
Thank you for your testimony. If you could sign in. Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jeanette LaRussa Fenton. I am the homeowner at 7725 Cedarhurst Lane, adjacent to Bingham Court and the proposed development. I am also a board member of the Burkford Place Homeowners Association, and I am authorized to speak on their behalf this evening. I am speaking in strong opposition to Major Modification 19-1297, and specifically against the opening of Bingham Court. I spoke about this over 3 years ago concerning another proposed development, and my comments tonight are the same. At that time, the zoning hearing master very wisely ruled in our favor, as did the county commission, and we hope you will do the same in your recommendation. As a local government official for over 40 years, 20 years with Hillsborough County and 21 years with the city of Tampa, one of the major truths I learned long ago is that good public policy emerges from sound theory coupled with practical application and common sense. The proposed modification fails the real-world application and common sense tests. We have no objection to the new development, and opening up Bingham Court is totally unnecessary for the new development to proceed. It is my understanding that the applicants did not initially request access to Bingham Court, but added it at county staff direction related to the Citrus Park Village Plan. So you have a rare thing here where you have both the developer and the neighborhood saying the same thing. When I purchased my home 15 years ago, the neighborhood's inclusion in the Citrus Park Village Plan appealed to me. Little did I know that it would be used in a negative way to harm the Burkford Place subdivision. Our opposition is based on the following concerns. Burkford Place is a small 65-home subdivision with narrow streets. We already experience difficulty maneuvering and unsafe conditions when there are cars parked within the right-of-way. The problem would be further compounded when the occupants and guests of the proposed 80 units utilize our subdivision for vehicular ingress and egress, which many would likely do to avoid this extreme congestion on Gun Highway. This creates a driving, pedestrian, and bicycling hazard for our residents, and there are many children in our subdivision. There are schools. They're constantly walking and driving and riding. We have senior citizens. We have disabled individuals. This would be a catastrophe. This is going to be an unbearable situation for Burkford Place residents and those living in the community east and west of Burkford Avenue outside of our subdivision. Traffic from Gun Highway would cut through the proposed development into Burkford Place and exit along Burkford Avenue and other neighborhood streets to avoid Gun Highway congestion, particularly at the intersection of Gun Highway and Sheldon Road at Sickles High School. This is totally unacceptable, would create serious safety issues, and would ruin the quality of life of Burkford Place residents and the surrounding community. It should also be noted that this cut-through traffic would access Gun Highway at the location of 4 schools, exacerbating an already dangerous situation for those attempting to enter Gun Highway. Not only are our narrow neighborhood streets unable to accommodate any increased traffic, the pavement conditions would quickly deteriorate, leading to costly repairs. The streets were designed and permitted to accommodate a 65-unit dead-end subdivision, not the traffic load that would be generated from cut-through traffic. Staff informed me of the potential for speed mitigating along Bingham, and if this is what I'm assuming is going to be speed bumps along Bingham or any other part of our subdivision, we strongly oppose that. We have them on Burkford. It's appropriate there. It's not appropriate in our subdivision. I understand the desire of property owners to develop their property at the highest and best use and have no objection to the development of the subject property as a residential neighborhood. Our sole objection is to the opening up of Bingham Court for any type of access. Although the Citrus Park plan may call for connectivity between subdivisions, I'm sure the intent was never to impose onerous burdens on existing residents and developments. As for multiple access points for emergency vehicles, opening Bingham will not likely accomplish this, as we already have a problem in Burkford Place with vehicles parked in the right-of-way that currently limit large emergency vehicle access. At this point, I'm scared if anybody has an emergency in our neighborhood, an ambulance or a fire truck can't get through. So that's not solving the problem. This is just totally ridiculous. The other concern is that almost every subdivision, many larger apartment homes, all up and down Ehrlich, Sheldon, Gunn, Linebaugh, only have one point of access. It's rampant all over, and these are new developments. So I don't think that should be imposed on our neighborhood when it's not being imposed or enforced anyone else. I strongly urge you to waive any connectivity between the proposed new development and Burkford Place, not open Bingham Court, and make this a condition of development of this subject property. Thank you.
Thank you. You could please sign in. Yes, ma'am, did you want to speak? All right. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Simone Johnson. I live at 7730 Cedarhurst Lane. I'm in the 33625 zip code. I actually live at the connection between Bingham and Cedarhurst. When we built our home there, we built it with the intention of raising our children there. Conditions were poor then. My children have never been able to walk to school. They're 16 now, and the thought of them walking through any of those areas scares me to death. I argue back and forth about that. So now having more traffic coming through, even with the proposed speed bumps, which will probably damage the struts on my car, with the proposed speed bumps isn't going to help in any way. These homes can be built without that Bingham connectivity, and I highly recommend that we do.
Thank you so much. If you could please sign in. All right, then we'll close opposition testimony and go back to county staff.
I would, again, just note for the record that if any of those folks who spoke tonight have questions regarding filing or argument to speak to the Board of County Commissioners, Fernando Quinones is available to answer those questions. I think Transportation would like to add some comments.
All right.
Just to put, Madam Hearing Master, just to put on the record that we're not proposing speed bumps on the proposed Bingham Drive and Bingham Road. We are proposing chicanes, which are basically ways to narrow the road into, instead of 2 lanes, 2 through lanes, into 1, so that actually the cars have to slow down, almost like stop for each other to have it only as 1 lane. And that way, but we're not proposing speed bumps in the proposed project.
All right. Thank you very much.
To further clarify, we're talking about within the project of the rezoning, not within the subdivision that these folks live.
Right.
That's where those changes will be made.
Where that facility is planned, but then the connection is still proposed.
Yes, correct.
Yes, understood. All right. then we'll go back to the applicant, who has 5 minutes.
Yes, I'd like to ask Steve Henry, our transportation engineer, to come up and address some of these issues.
Thank you.
Good evening. Steve Henry, Links & Associates, 5023 West Laurel, Tampa 33607. Wanted to address the issues on the cut-through and what we're doing. For one, as indicated, we didn't propose the connection to Bingham. Applicant is perfectly happy without the connection to Bingham, but in the event that it is there, we want to at least be able to show that we don't believe that the cut-through is going to be significant through there for a number of reasons. One, just to orient you, just so you can see, this is Burkford here. This is Gun Highway. Burkford here. This goes up to the Bingham here, which people would have to come up here, turn left onto Bingham, and then go through the subdivision, go through the proposed townhome project over to Gun Highway. And there's a number of reasons why we think that cut through would be minimized. One is at the southern end of it, you've got a school. So you've got traffic that's backing out actually onto Burkford in that area, which obviously creates some congestion just in and of itself. And then three, there are, tough to see, but there are 3 speed bumps along Burkford from Gun Highway up to the subdivision. This just kind of shows the location of the 3 speed bumps that are there, which would slow people down. This is the 3rd one. This is the entrance to the subdivision. Then in addition to that, as indicated, there are 2 chicanes that are proposed to be provided. So this is the Bingham Court. This is the proposed townhome project. And there's 2 chicanes, one as you enter here and then one also near Gun Highway. And what I've done is shown a picture of what they look like to give you a better idea. So you can see what this is as you approach this, it goes from a 2-lane road down to 1 lane. So you actually, if someone's coming the other direction, you actually have to stop. One person has to let the other one go, then you continue on. So the idea that this would be quicker than going through Gun Highway is highly unlikely because of the school congestion, because of the speed bumps, and because of the chicanes, and having to find your way through, as they indicated, their residential streets. So from that standpoint, we don't believe that the cut-through would be significant. But again, from our standpoint, we're perfectly happy without the connection to Bingham.
And this is a question for you that perhaps you don't know because it's not on this site, but the testimony in opposition regarding the width of Bingham Court. Do you have any idea how wide that road is?
They're 20-foot wide road.
Oh, it's a 20,
Yes.
the travel lane is 20 feet.
The 20, yes, correct.
I see. All right. And so what is the developer's feeling about an emergency access?
We're perfectly fine with emergency access.
And the chicane still stays?
No, the chicanes would go away. If there's only emergency access, there would be no cut-through, so there would be no reason for having those at that point in time. It would just be...
I see. Only to slow down the traffic if
right,
it's a full access.
The only purpose for this is full access to limit or eliminate the cut-through traffic.
Understood. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just also wanted to clarify that if emergency access is proposed, then there will be a gate. Those are gated, and they give Knox box access to the fire marshal. So that just to make that clarification on the record.
Did you have one additional comment you wanted to make? You just put your name on the record.
Yasin, Development Services, Transportation. So I just wanted to add that if it's an emergency access, we would like to have at least a pedestrian connectivity through so that people can walk to the neighborhoods. Having it as a connection is actually going to provide accessibility to the residents who are here for opposition to Gun Highway easier instead of going through the arterial collector roads around. So it gives them an alternative route to get out of their subdivision through the proposed subdivision. So we would like to at least provide emergency access and a pedestrian access if that will be recommendation.
I see.
But our preferred recommendation is having a full access with chicanes.
All right, thank you. I'll give you the last word.
Just like to say again on the record that the Board of County Commissioners has found this a development of 80 units to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land development code without disconnection. So again, I think that I appreciate what staff is saying and that staff is trying to promote connectivity, but the board has already reached a decision on this, and what we're proposing in our development and what we needed for our development really didn't relate to that access point. We were changing the unit type and the design standard, so it's not like we triggered a change where what we're doing now necessitates the connection. It's a different situation than that, and we do appreciate the neighbors being very professional with us, very upfront, and we do apologize that they had to come out this evening to address this issue with you.
All right, thank you so much. And then with that, we'll close major modification 19-1297 and adjourn the hearing. Thank you all for your time and testimony.